I saw her again this morning, though I'd never admit that I keep track of when she leaves the building. Our doors faced the same cracked parking lot, same view of the laundry lines sagging between rusted poles. She was carrying a paper bag, probably groceries, but she moved slower than the rest of the world, like she didn't care if anyone was waiting behind her. I pretended to scroll my phone, thumb hovering over an unsent text I'd typed last night. "You up?" Never sent it. I never do. When she passed, I looked up too late. Or maybe just in time. Her eyes caught mine, and she didn't smile, she just looked. Not long enough to make it obvious, but longer than a neighbor usually should. I told myself I was reading into it. Still, when I walked down to the corner cafe an hour later, she was already there. Alone at the table near the window, her hands wrapped around a mug even though the coffee had cooled. You could tell by the way she wasn't sipping anymore. I ordered my usual. The barista didn't even ask, she just pressed it into my hand with a grin. "Back again?" she said. "Yeah," I muttered, folding the paper sleeve around the cup until it wrinkled like an old letter. When I turned, the widow was watching. She tilted her head slightly, like she recognized the routine, the same coffee, the same empty seat across from me. I sat anyway, at the table beside hers. Close enough to hear the tick of her spoon against the saucer. Not close enough to say anything. She broke the silence first. "You always come here alone?" Her voice was softer than I expected, a little rough, like it hadn't been used much today. I shrugged. "Guess so." "That's rare," she said, stirring sugar into a drink that no longer needed it. I wanted to ask her the same thing. Why she sat alone, why her wedding ring was gone, why her eyes looked both tired and awake at the same time. But I didn't. Instead, I watched her fold her napkin neatly into thirds, then unfold it again. "I see you in the mornings," I said, surprising myself. She looked over. A beat of silence. Then, "I know." That was all. But it felt like more. We sat like that for a while, not talking. Just existing in parallel. Every time I lifted my cup, I caught her glance. Every time she shifted in her chair, I adjusted mine too, like we were orbiting the same quiet pull. Eventually she stood. Gathered her bag, slid her chair back without hurry. She looked down at me, directly this time. Her lips pressed together, like she might say something, but didn't. Instead, her eyes lingered. And it felt, ridiculous as it sounds, like she was asking me something without words. An invitation or a warning. I couldn't tell which. By the time I left, the space she'd occupied was still warm in the air. When I got back to my apartment, there was a message waiting. Not from her. Just a delivery update, some automated text. Still, I stood in the doorway too long, phone in hand, staring at the thin wall between her place and mine. I thought about knocking. I didn't. But I swear, when I turned to lock the door, her light flicked on across the hall. And through the thin curtains, I could feel her eyes on me again. Like she was still asking. Like she was still waiting. The next time I saw her wasn't in the cafe, but in the hallway. She was standing outside her door, fumbling with a grocery bag that had split open at the bottom. A carton of tea had rolled across the floor, stopping at my shoes. I picked it up. "You all right?" She laughed, just a breath of it. "These bags are older than me." "Not possible," I said without thinking. Her eyes flicked up, catching mine. She didn't answer. Just unlocked her door and nudged it open with her hip. For a second, I thought that was the end of it. But then she tilted her head, barely, like a silent nod to follow. Inside, her place smelled faintly of chamomile and dust. It was tidy but lived in, books stacked unevenly, a sweater draped over the arm of the couch. She placed the groceries on the counter and said, "You can set that down anywhere." I did, hovering by the table. My hands itched for something to do, so I started folding the torn bag into a smaller square. She noticed. "Careful," she said. "You'll make yourself useful." I smiled. Maybe that's the point. We ended up sitting at her small kitchen table, 2 mugs of tea between us. She didn't ask how I took mine, she just poured, as if she already knew I wouldn't complain. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it pressed in from the edges. I watched her stir her cup even after the sugar had dissolved. She caught me looking. "You don't talk much," she said. "Neither do you," I replied. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms loosely. "I used to. My husband said I could fill a room without trying." A pause. "Now, I guess I don't see the point." I didn't know what to say. I was 22, with a phone full of half-friends and conversations that never mattered. I wanted to tell her that sometimes I left my messages unsent because no one on the other end really listened anyway. But the words stuck. Instead, I said, "He must have liked that about you." Her gaze shifted toward the window. "Not enough to stay alive, apparently." The words landed heavy. I didn't move. She didn't cry, or even soften. Just sipped her tea, like she was used to saying it out loud now. I thought about leaving, giving her space. But something in me stayed seated, like my presence mattered more than my words. "I'm sorry," I said finally. She looked back at me, almost amused. "Why? You didn't do it." We sat in the stillness. Her hand rested near her cup, fingers tapping lightly against the wood grain. I kept glancing at them, at the thin pale line where a ring used to be. My chest tightened with the thought, too old for me, too complicated, too dangerous. And yet when she asked, "How old are you?" I didn't lie. 22. She let out a quiet hum, almost like a sigh. "My son would have been your age." That broke something in me. Not in a bad way, more like a door cracking open. I wanted to ask everything, what he was like, where he was now, why she compared me to him. But her face had already closed the subject. So instead, I reached for the sugar bowl to refill her cup. My fingers brushed hers. Just for a second. She didn't pull away. She didn't look away either. And that tiny touch felt heavier than any kiss I'd ever had. Later, when I was back in my apartment, I kept thinking about it. Not the words, not even the tea. Just the weight of her hand under mine. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next week, everything shifted. It started small, her knocking on my door with a dish towel in hand. "My sink's acting up," she said. "Mind taking a look?" I wasn't a plumber. But I followed her in anyway, sleeves pushed up, pretending I knew what I was doing with the stubborn faucet. She stood close, too close, leaning against the counter with arms folded. "You're very patient," she murmured. "With sinks?" Her mouth curved, half a smile, half something else. "With people." I wanted to say something back, but before I could, there was a knock on her door. A voice calling, "Mom?" She froze. I froze. The sound of keys jangling. A younger man, maybe my age, pushed inside without waiting. Her son. Not the one she'd mentioned. Another. Alive, here, standing in the kitchen doorway, staring at me with his eyebrows arched. "Who's this?" he asked. I wiped my hands on a rag, trying to look casual. "Neighbor." His eyes flicked between us, sharp, suspicious. He muttered something about grabbing his charger from his old room, then disappeared down the hall. The silence that followed was unbearable. She leaned against the counter again, but this time her arms were crossed tighter, her face angled away from me. "You should go," she said quietly. I wanted to argue. To tell her I hadn't done anything wrong. But her tone left no space for protest. So I left, the sound of her son's footsteps following me all the way back across the hall. For a few days I avoided her. Or maybe she avoided me. My coffee tasted flat, my phone stayed silent. Every time I heard movement through the wall, I stopped whatever I was doing, listening for her voice, her laugh, even the scrape of her chair. Nothing. Then, one night, a knock on my door. Soft, almost uncertain. When I opened it, she stood there, sweater loose around her shoulders, eyes rimmed with tiredness. She didn't explain. Just held out a mug. Tea, she said. Made too much. I let her in. We sat on my couch this time, the steam rising between us. She didn't say a word about her son. I didn't ask. Instead, we talked about nothing, books stacked on her shelf, the weather, a movie either of us had actually seen. And beneath it all, the silence stretched, pulled taut like a string. At one point, she reached for her mug and our knees brushed. Neither of us moved. I shouldn't, she whispered, but didn't finish. Her hand was resting on the cushion between us, palm open, waiting or resisting, I couldn't tell which. My fingers twitched, ready to close the distance. Just an inch. Just the smallest touch. But then she drew back. Wrapped her hands tightly around her mug like a shield. It's late, she said, forcing a smile. She stood before I could answer. At the door, she turned. Her lips parted, like she wanted to explain. Apologize. Something. Instead, she just gave me that look again, the one that felt like an invitation and a warning all at once. Then she left. I sat there in the dark, the imprint of her knee still pressed against mine, replaying that half moment. The almost touch. The almost confession. And I realized, sometimes the things we don't do haunt us louder than the things we do. It was late afternoon when I saw her sitting outside the building, on the old wooden bench that leaned a little too far to one side. She was in a cardigan, arms crossed, staring at the empty lot like it was showing her something no one else could see. I almost walked past. Almost. But then she shifted, and without looking at me said, "Sit if you want." So I did. The wood creaked under my weight, our shoulders not touching but close enough that I could feel the warmth of her presence. For a while, we said nothing. The breeze carried bits of conversation from people passing, fragments of laughter, car doors slamming. She kept her eyes forward, lips pressed in. Finally, she spoke. "You've been quiet." I swallowed. "Thought you wanted space." She turned slightly, a trace of humor flicking at her mouth. "And you always do what women tell you." I almost smiled, but her tone wasn't teasing. There was something underneath it. Something sharp. Her fingers tapped against her sleeve, restless. "I saw you at the cafe yesterday. With that girl. Blonde." She laughed at everything you said. It took me a second to process. "You noticed?" "I notice everything." She looked down, then shook her head, almost embarrassed. "Forget I said that." Jealousy. That's what it was. I'd never have guessed she was capable of it, not with me, not with anyone. But the silence that followed made it undeniable. "I don't even know her," I said quietly. "She just asked to borrow the chair." Her eyes flicked to mine, skeptical but searching. The tension stretched until I couldn't hold it anymore. "Do you ever wonder what people would think?" She frowned. "People?" "Yeah. If they saw us sitting here, talking, drinking tea." Her face shifted, an ache pulling at the corners of her expression. "They'd think I was foolish," she said. "That I didn't know my place. And me? They'd think you're wasting your time." I let the words hang. She meant them to push me away, but instead, they only drew me in. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "You know that's not what this feels like." She blinked, startled by the directness. Then her hands gripped the edge of the bench, knuckles pale. "Don't say that." "Why not?" "Because if you say it, I might believe it." The air between us shifted, heavy, fragile. She exhaled, slow, like she'd been holding something back for weeks. "I told myself after he died I wouldn't. I couldn't." She broke off, eyes glassy but unspilled. "You make it too easy to forget." I wanted to reach for her hand, to close the distance, but my body wouldn't move. "Not yet." Her voice dropped. "I don't know what you want from me." The question wasn't really a question. It was a line drawn in the dust, trembling, waiting to be crossed or erased. I turned toward her, close enough to see the tiny lines at the edge of her eyes, the way her lips parted just slightly when she breathed. And for a heartbeat, I almost said it. Almost told her everything. Instead, the silence swallowed the words. Her gaze met mine, open, raw, exposed. And in the smallest voice, she asked, "Are you going to break me?" The next morning, her window stayed dark. Usually, I'd catch the faint glow of her lamp while I made coffee, a shadow moving past the curtain. But that day, nothing. Just silence and drawn blinds. I told myself it didn't matter. People change routines. Maybe she slept in, maybe she went out early. But the longer the stillness lasted, the more it pressed against me. I checked my phone twice. Thought about sending a simple message. "You okay?" But stopped at the typing bubble. I didn't even have her number. And maybe that was the point. 2 days later, I saw her in the lobby. She looked different. Dressed sharper, hair tied back, a coat that seemed more deliberate than her usual sweaters. When she noticed me, she smiled politely, the kind of smile you give strangers in elevators. "Going somewhere?" I asked, careful. "Just out," she said. And that was all. Her voice had a wall in it. The warmth I'd grown used to was gone, tucked behind something formal. She walked past before I could think of anything else to say. At the cafe, her chair by the window stayed empty. I kept glancing at it anyway, expecting her to slide into view, wrap her hands around a mug, tilt her head the way she always did when listening. Instead, it was a college kid one day, an older couple the next. Strangers filling a space that had felt like ours. I tried to focus on my own routine, class, part-time shifts, late dinners alone, but everything felt unbalanced. Like someone had shifted the floor a few inches, and I couldn't walk steady anymore. When I finally saw her again, it was outside by the mailboxes. She was pulling letters from the slot, flipping through them too quickly, like she wasn't really reading. "Hey," I said. She hesitated, then nodded. "Hi." The pause stretched. I wanted to ask where she'd been, why she felt distant. Instead, I said, "Busy week?" Her lips pressed tight. She looked at the envelopes in her hands. "My daughter's visiting. From out of state." I hadn't known she had a daughter. She'd never mentioned her. "That's good," I said, though my chest tightened with the weight of it. Another piece of her life I wasn't part of. Another closed door. She gave a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah. Good." Then she excused herself, retreating quickly down the hall. That night, I stared at my phone again. Drafted a message I couldn't send. I don't know what changed. I just know I miss you. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I deleted it before I could think too long. Instead, I sat on my bed, the wall between our apartments pressing in on me like a weight. Her laughter used to slip through sometimes. Now, there was only silence. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe she wanted it that way. It was raining the night it happened. Not the heavy kind, just a steady drizzle that blurred the streetlights and made the pavement shine. I found her outside the building again, on the same uneven bench. No coat this time, just her sweater pulled tight around her. The hood of my jacket dripped as I sat beside her. For a while, we just listened to the rain. Finally I said, "You've been gone." She didn't look at me. "I needed space." "From me?" Her lips pressed together. "From myself." The words cut sharper than I expected. I wanted to stay quiet, but something in me pushed forward. "I don't know what I did wrong." She turned her head then, eyes dark and tired. "You didn't do anything wrong. That's the problem." I frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It means—" She stopped, shaking her head. Her hand twisted the sleeve of her sweater. "It means you make me feel things I told myself I wasn't allowed to feel anymore." The rain filled the silence. My throat tightened. "You think I don't notice?" She went on, voice low. "The way you look at me. The way I let you." She laughed once, soft and bitter. "I'm old enough to know better." Her honesty was like a door thrown open and slammed shut all at once. I should have said something, comfort, protest, anything, but all I managed was, "And I'm young enough not to care." Her eyes flicked to mine. Searching. Wavering. The rain dripped off the edge of her hair, and I wanted to reach up, brush it away. My hand moved, almost without permission, stopping inches from her cheek. I pulled back before touching. Her breath caught anyway. "Why are you here?" she whispered. "Because you're the only one I want to be here with." She closed her eyes, just for a second, like the words hurt. Then opened them again, steady this time. "I can't promise you anything," she said. "Not a future. Not even tomorrow. I don't even know who I am half the time. I'm not asking for promises." My voice felt small. "Just honesty." That word lingered. She looked at me for a long time, so long I thought she might stand and walk away. Instead, she reached out, almost hesitantly, and rested her hand on mine. Not interlaced, not held. Just there. Skin against skin. It wasn't passion. It wasn't possession. It was something quieter. A fragile truce between two people who had run out of ways to avoid the truth. We sat like that until the rain began to thin. She finally exhaled, a sound like surrender. "Okay." That's all she said. But it was enough. It didn't happen all at once. There was no kiss in the rain, no sudden confession that rewrote everything. Just small shifts, so gradual I almost didn't notice them at first. She started leaving her window open again. Light spilling across the lot at night. I'd catch glimpses of her silhouette with a book in her lap, or the tilt of her head as she made tea. I stopped pretending I didn't time my mornings to match hers. By 8:47 a.m., I'd be locking my door, coffee in hand, just as she stepped out with her thermos. We didn't always walk together. Sometimes just a nod, a morning, nothing more. But other days our steps fell in rhythm. And slowly, the distance softened. One evening I came home late from work. The bench outside the building was damp from an afternoon storm. She was there, waiting. "Tea," she said, lifting a second cup. "Chamomile. Figured you'd need it." I sat beside her, still in my work shirt, shoes muddy. She didn't comment. Just passed the cup into my hand like it belonged there. We sat in silence, steam rising into the cool air. The same bench where she once asked if I would break her. This time, she didn't look afraid. Instead, she said quietly, "You make it easier. Just being here." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because nothing I said could matter more than the fact I was there, beside her, with tea cooling in my hands. Weeks passed. Her daughter came and went. Sometimes I heard them laughing through the walls. Sometimes I heard nothing at all. But little by little, she let me in, grocery runs, fixing the sink for real this time, evenings where she'd knock on my door just to ask, "Coffee?" even though it was already late. The conversations grew deeper, but not louder. We didn't define anything. We didn't try to. We just kept showing up. And that was enough. One morning, at the cafe, the barista handed me my usual without asking. I turned to find her already sitting near the window. For the first time, I didn't sit at the table beside hers. I sat across from her. She raised her eyebrows at me like it was a bold move. Maybe it was. "You're braver than you look," she teased, stirring her cup. "Or just stubborn," I said. Her smile lingered. Not polite, not hidden. Real. Now, when I think back, I don't remember one grand turning point. Not the bench. Not the rain. Not even the night she rested her hand on mine. I remember the ordinary things. The way she folds her napkins into thirds. The way she checks her watch at exactly 8:47 a.m. before leaving the apartment. The way her tea always cools before she drinks it. The way, little by little, she let me stay. And somehow, that became love. Not the loud kind. Not the kind you announce. Just the kind that grows in the quiet, where it finally feels safe. I looked at her across the table that morning, her hand resting near her cup, fingers tapping lightly. For a moment, she caught me watching. What? She asked, almost laughing. Nothing, I said. But I smiled. Because the truth was simple. She was here. And so was I. That was enough. Ch2.